What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. So last week I made a hunter build video and a lot of comments said it was not viable in endgame. And while it may not be the best for endgame, I will still probably solo a GM with it next time we get Solar Surge just to prove the naysayers wrong. And trust me, I do get why people think it may not work, and I even referenced the shortcomings in that video. But all that is to say that this week, we have a build video that is specifically designed for endgame content. It is actually better in endgame content than it is in lower end content, and once again, I will discuss why that is and show off just how awesome it is. I used it in this week's Europa Battlegrounds GM when I was solo, and came away extremely impressed with its performance. So what is this build, you ask? Well, it centers around the recently reworked Hunter exotic chest piece, Lucky Raspberry. It has the exotic perk Probability Matrix, increase the chaining capabilities of arc bolt grenades, damaging enemies with jolt lightning strikes and collecting ionic traces both grant additional arc bolt grenade energy. Arc bolt grenades stun overload champions and delay their health regeneration. So first off, let's talk about the last line real quick, where they intrinsically stun overload champions. This has been bugged all season, and I just confirmed that it is still bugged by testing it yesterday. As a result, we must use the fragment Spark of Shock, which allows our arc grenades to jolt targets. This is the most crucial fragment of the whole build, but what would be a freaking awesome change would be if Bungie just gave arc bolt grenades intrinsic jolt when Lucky Raspberry is on. This would free up an extra fragment slot and not make us lose 10 discipline for running Spark of Shock. That would honestly make this exotic that much better, but trust me, it's already extremely good. So now, let's talk about the rest of the exotic. It says it increases the chaining capabilities of arc bolt grenades. This just increases the chaining from 3 to 4. Nothing significant, but it's still a nice buff. But the part that really makes this exotic shine is the part where it says damaging enemies with jolt lightning strikes and collecting ionic traces both grant additional arc bolt energy. The energy return on this is significant to say the least. Even with no enemies around, it only takes about 4 procs of jolt to get our grenade back. And a weapon like Wish Ender has the perfect draw speed to proc jolt on each shot, as jolt procs have about a 0.8 second cooldown between lightning activations. So what does this mean? Well, it means we get an arc bolt grenade back in about 8 seconds, which is crazy because at base, an arc bolt has a cooldown of 1:45, and with 100 discipline, that goes to 52 seconds. And the Destiny Data Compendium states that you get 20% grenade energy on each jolt trigger, so you'd need 5 procs to go from 0 to 100. But with a low grenade cooldown, that passive regen time will get you there in 4 procs. And that's not even to mention the ionic traces that you pick up grant 5% extra grenade ability energy, on top of already granting 12.5% at base, which means each ionic trace we pick up we are getting 17.5% of our grenade back. So you can see how we can basically spam our arc bolt grenades. It's actually wild. So we already touched on Spark of Shock, so let's round out the other fragments that you want to run with this build, and then we will get into the aspects after that. We also want Spark of Ions, where defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. This build is all about applying jolt, and I just went over the benefits of picking up ionic traces, so it's a very natural fit. And for even more ability regen, we want Spark of Recharge. While critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy regenerates more quickly. This is a 400% increase to our base regeneration rate on the grenade and melee, so huge ability regeneration. And lastly, I run Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. You have to be within 15 meters of 3 enemies for this to proc, and it's a 25% damage resistance. Again, this build is for endgame content, and this will obviously help with survivability. That being said, if you are confident in being able to survive without it, then you can throw in a different fragment here. Spark of Discharge specifically would be good in lower end content if you are running arc weapons, as it will create even more ionic traces. So now let's look at aspects. First up is Flow State. Defeating a jolted target makes you amplified. While you are amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly, you are more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. The reload speed is super nice, and it works great with Wish Ender because it effectively raises the DPS of it by allowing you to shoot slightly quicker because you can knock in the arrow faster. It also gets you your dodge back 200% quicker than base regen rate, and we will get into why your dodge is super important in just a little bit. So yeah, this is a wonderful aspect as we are amplified a lot with this build thanks to all the jolting that we're doing. The next aspect is actually Tempest Strike. I haven't ran this aspect very much because for Arc Hunter, it is really hard for me to take off Combination Blow with either Liar's Handshake or Assassin's Cowl, but I gotta say, I've been super impressed with this aspect. It states while sliding, activate your charged melee ability to unleash a devastating uppercut attack that travels along the ground in front of you, damaging and jolting targets that it hits. So once again, this allows us to jolt targets, and the damage it does is actually quite decent. But the jolt it provides is just another way for us to feed into our grenade regeneration. So yeah, definitely run it with this build. It's excellent. So next, let us look at the mods for this build. My build was curated specifically around the Europa Battlegrounds GM as a solo, so you can run what you like here, but I do want to highlight a few specific mods that are important for this build, because depending on the content that you are running, the mods can change quite a bit because the playstyle will change. For weapons, I had Wish Ender, a solar fusion rifle, and an arc machine gun. So I had Harmonic and Kinetic Siphon on to make orbs with Wish Ender or my machine gun. And I had double Kinetic Surge on the boots to buff Wish Ender even more, as it is the primary damage source during the boss fight. And also an Arc Scavenger for the machine gun ammo. On the chest, I had the Rainbow for elemental resistance, but again, this is activity dependent. Because there are so many shielded adds in the Europa Battleground GM, we had Shield Break Charge on, but depending on the content that you're running, you can swap this out for sure. Then we had Bolstering Detonation, which grants us class ability energy when we deal damage with a grenade. Because we are always throwing grenades, this will get us our dodge back very quickly. Also, you really want Fastball with this build, as it helps a ton when throwing the Arc Bolt grenades accurately. If you don't like Fastball, you don't need to run it, but I really love it when I run Arc Bolts. And then on the class item, we have 2 Bomber mods for more grenade energy when we dodge. So you can see how these 2 mods fuel each other. Bolstering Detonation gives us our dodge ability back quicker, and then Bomber helps give us our grenade energy back quicker. It's a lovely little feedback loop. But ideally, if you are playing with the build properly, you won't even need to dodge for grenade energy. But it is a wonderful backup to have, as this build is heavily reliant on throwing grenades to get the whole synergistic loop going. So naturally, that brings us to the next part, the gameplay loop. This loop is very unlike most grenade-centric builds. Sunbracers and Controverse Hold Warlocks are all about spamming your grenades for ad clear and high single target damage. Arc Titan with Hoyle is also similar, with pulse grenades being big damage on single targets, but Arc Bolts, you do not want to use these for ad clear necessarily. It kills the grenade spam loop. You need to shoot jolted targets for grenade energy back. So what you do is you tag up a high health target like a champion with the grenade, and then you shoot it over and over to get your grenade energy back. And then you seek to throw out another grenade on another high health target. So this build is more about supplemental damage from your grenades. And it is great in this week's Nightfall, as there are lots of enemies around to spread the jolt to. So it ad clears in a different way. It ad clears by being able to get jolt procs off very often and very consistently, rather than the grenade doing all the work. It is also decent for ad clear, don't get me wrong, but you will not have near as high of uptime on your grenades because the grenade will take out a bunch of enemies and you won't be able to get your jolt procs off. Try the build out for yourself and you'll see what I mean. That being said, I was able to get finished with the Clovis Bray Room in 25 minutes with this build, and it took me 29 minutes to do it on an Arc Titan with Hoyle with the same weapon loadout. That being said, the Hunter build was strongly aided by the Gathering Storm Super to speed up the Death Tongue Chorister and killing the 3 wizards. The opening room was about an 8-minute clear for both builds, but I'm just saying that to highlight that this build can hang with the best ones out there. I didn't test Fallen Sunstar Warlock, but I imagine it would be similar. So now that we know the aspects, fragments, mods, and gameplay loop, I want to talk about weapons really quickly. Again, this build in particular is focused to GM content, but if you wanted to run this in lower end content, then you could use Volt Shot weapons to apply your jolt. That way, if on the rare chance you don't have your grenade up, you could get a kill, apply jolt to a target with Volt Shot, and then start your grenade feedback loop once again. Song of Your Ute can roll Demolitionist and Volt Shot, so this would give you insane grenade uptime, as does Tarnished Metal from Season of the Plunder. This is just another backup for getting your grenade back, and if it was lower end content, you could run Innervation on your boots instead of Weapon Surges to get grenade energy back on orb pickup, and you could run 1 or 2 grenade kickstart mods on your arms for more grenade energy back. So there are lots of different ways to adjust your mods depending on the content that you're running. In lower end content, your Volt Shot weapons can do more of the work for getting your grenade energy loop going. But in higher end content, stick to jolting high health targets for big grenade regen. Additionally, Osteostriga with this build is quite nice in legend haunted sectors because the damage over time will proc the jolt every time the jolt cooldown is up. Just wanted to throw that in there. But again, these grenades are not nearly as powerful as things like pulse grenades, solar grenades, and vortex grenades. So just remember that. It is a different playstyle, but effective nonetheless. And that finally brings us to the artifact mods. Again, in high-end content, you definitely want Rapid Fire Ranger to apply debuffs with Wish Ender, Monochromatic Maestro for 10% more ability and weapon damage. This is absolutely great with Gathering Storm, as you can shoot your machine gun and then throw the super. You could also do this every time you throw an Arc Bolt grenade. And then when a champion is stunned, it will be debuffed, and Elemental Fury will deal 35% more grenade damage to the champion. And then Semi-Auto Striker will give you armor charge for getting crits with Wish Ender. Obviously we want Arc Elemental Orbs, and if you don't need Overload Machine Gun, then run Refreshing Pickups for even more ability energy when you pick up an Elemental Orb. This one is not great in this week's GM, as you are often shooting enemies at a distance and can't pick up the orbs, but in some of the gameplay you have been seeing a Master Lost sector and it could be nice in there. And speaking of that, this build wrecks in Master level content. I was extremely impressed when I tested it out for this video. Lastly, I want to talk about a few abilities. We want Gambler's Dodge for the melee back when we dodge near an enemy. This is great for more Tempest Strike spam. And then we want Disorienting Blow, which blinds enemies. This is good in a pinch if you get pushed by an Arc Charge Captain or Wizard in the boss room. And just as a reminder, Blind can also stun unstoppable champions. Finally, for your super, don't sleep on Arc Staff. It is not ideal for the GM if you are solo, but if you are in a team, it will wreck in the boss room. Gathering Storm is awesome solo for the Wizards and Death Tongue Chorister, but Arc Staff is great for ad clear, and that is your biggest threat in the boss room. I was actually quite impressed with it, but it's just a little too risky for solo GMs. And now, that covers the entire build. Again, I was extremely impressed with how well it performed. I love that Bungie is reworking old, unused exotics, as it gives a totally fresh new way to play. So try out Lucky Raspberry for yourself and let me know how you like it. As usual, the dim link will be in the description. If you liked this video, then clicking the like button would be pretty awesome of you. And if you want to see more awesome endgame builds in the future, then be sure to subscribe. I hope to keep putting out at least one new build a week. I live for Destiny build crafting, and I haven't really seen many people show off the power of Lucky Raspberry yet. I can't wait to show you what other fun and unique builds I have cooked up. Finally, if you made it this far, then thank you so much for watching. It means a lot. Happy grenade spamming, and take care.